capitalism.
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 Hypercapitalism or uber-capitalism.
I am a capitalist.
Today I'm surrounded by 20 anti-capitalists.
But for a woman to cheat at the game of capitalism is despicable.
Capitalism. We hear this term thrown around a lot these days, and quite frankly, when I hear this word every single time, especially when it's said in the mainstream, like in the news or in political commentary, I am the guy in the sickos meme going, yes, yes. I'm Dr. Hilary Agro. I have a PhD in anthropology where I studied capitalism, colonialism, drug prohibition, and activism and organizing against those first three. This is what an academic looks like. This is peak academic performance. Yarr. It's laundry day. I don't know what to tell you. This is all I had left. Listen, some academics are weirder than others. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, or I will make you walk the plank, you scurvy brigand.
Recent events have brought it to my attention that niggas don't know what capitalism is or how it works.
The fact that people are actually using this term now is a really good sign, because we cannot fight what we don't know exists. Its existence is finally being made visible to us through the use of the term. What is capitalism? Capitalism is a human-made social system that's organized around the private ownership of both land and the means of production, which are the tools and resources that are used to make things in society that we need or want, like food, houses, and whatever a labubu is. Land and the means of production are maintained and operated by wage laborers, also called labor. That's you and I, people who work for money or do other kinds of work that support the wage laborers in our lives, like taking care of the kids if you're a stay-at-home parent whose partner works. You're not getting paid directly to do it, but someone's got to clean cereal off the ceiling to keep society functioning. Because no matter what system you're living in, the existence of children is necessary, or literally everything falls apart, as shown in the most accurate dystopian future film of all time, Children of Men. Okay, so in this system, access to most of the things humans need to survive, such as land, clean water, food, shelter, etc., is controlled by a relatively small number of people, who are called capitalists, and again, that's probably not you watching this right now, who own factories, companies, machines, land, and other means used to produce, you're getting it now, what we need to live within this system, as access to the stuff that Mother Nature gives us for free out of the goodness of her beautiful homeostatic heart is restricted by laws made by capitalists and their allies that are backed up by state violence enacted by people they've propagandized and paid to enforce these laws. You know the ones I mean. How did capitalists get hold of the means and the land in the first place? Well, they did it via enclosure of the commons, which means taking control of land that was previously collectively stewarded, and or colonization, which is the same thing, but you do it to someone else's society instead of your own. That privately controlled land is either passed down through a system of inheritance or sold to others. And over generations, many people eventually have tended to forget that the land was taken by force in the first place and used to be shared. The capitalists, or owners, hire other people, laborers or workers, that's us, to do the work required to maintain the land and make the things that sustain society. You know, the tractors and labubus and such. When someone buys, or increasingly in our society rents, the things that have been made, all of that money goes to the owners, who pay a portion of it to the laborers who have done the actual work to make the thing. A portion of the money goes to maintaining the operations, and the owners keep the rest, which is the profit, to use however they want. Because it is the owners who decide what to do with the profit is an inherently undemocratic system. Under this system, the lives of owners tends to be much more materially comfortable, though not emotionally or socially comfortable, which I'll get into later, than the lives of laborers, who often have to fight to get paid enough to afford all the things that have, in the system of capitalism, been turned into commodities that you have to purchase, like medical care, childcare, housing, education, food, water, legal counsel, and a long list of other basic needs that cost money under capitalism. I'm sure you're familiar with this part. It's obviously more complicated than this, but this is the basic gist, so don't let any neoliberal economist or anyone else convince you that it's too complicated for you to understand.
They just want you to stop paying attention.
The main thing to understand when it comes to capitalism and colonialism as well, but I'm going to make a separate video about that, but this concept is essential for both, is to understand how land factors in. This is a key piece that is often missing in discussions of capitalism and conceptions of it. It's all about land and who maintains ownership and access to land. And when I say land, I'm using a sort of pan-indigenous conception of it to refer not just to the earth that we walk on, that stuff grows in, but the stuff that grows in the earth, the trees and plants, as well as the water and air and other parts of our natural ecosystem that we as mammals, we are a primate species. I think that people forget about this a lot too. We are a species of primate, we are mammals, we depend on our environment to survive. Again, the fact that we actually forget about this sometimes and in capitalist society are so disconnected from land that it's easy to think that, well, food comes from the grocery store, water comes from the tap, instead of food comes from the earth and water comes from lakes and rivers. Because colonization and capitalism, this fundamental core of those systems, what happens is disconnecting people from land. The reason that it's so important to remember this is because private ownership of land is the key to understanding capitalism. For 200,000 plus years of human history, so we're talking like 99% of human history, land ownership was not a concept. It can be a little bit dangerous to generalize across indigenous populations because they are all very varied and unique, but indigenous peoples do share a few things in common, and one of which is their conception of land as something that is to be stewarded, not to be owned privately. For most of human history, people lived on the land like any other animals lived on the land. We foraged for food, we hunted, we engaged in horticulture, we engaged in gathering, we fished, planted gardens, we tended to gardens, but there was no conception of private land ownership because all land is shared. We are a part of the land is a part of us, and our survival depends on the ongoing existence and thriving of the ecosystems of which we are a part. And because ownership goes along with commodification under the system of capitalism and colonialism, commodification of land and resources essentially means exploitation and death to the ecosystem. And you can see that today through the climate crisis, because when we commodify land, it's always going to come back to bite us because there is just no way to extract resources at the rate at which it's happening and not fuck up the environment, which is pretty delicate. Under capitalism, land ownership is a political, legal, and social concept that people ascribe to that is defended through the use of violence. That's another thing that's important to remember about capitalism is the only way to maintain the system is through violence, coercion, and force. If somebody owns their private land, private property, and you have some papers that say that, well, what if some other people want to go on it and be like, no, this is ours now? Well, the owner has access to a system of legality which is backed up by state violence. This is the police and the legal system that says that, no, this person owns it. So if somebody else tries to get on that land and that owner doesn't want that, the owner can use the courts or use the police to kick them off. This system of land ownership means that only a small number of human beings have access to the land in order to use the resources on the land, and the land isn't collectively owned and collectively stewarded and taken care of, but it's privately owned and privately done whatever the private owner wants with it. As people who live in capitalist countries where most of the land is either owned by the state or the crown, in the case of people who live in settler colonies that are still beholden to the monarchy, like I do here in Canada, most of the land that people live on is owned by private individuals or corporations. And so what that means is the land has already been parceled out. That happened during colonization. And therefore, in order to live on the land, you either have to inherit it, have family that were given a piece of the land during colonization or took it, or you have to have enough money to buy a piece of that land to own it, to live on it yourself, or you have to pay rent to somebody else who owns the land. And that's what most workers do under this system. We pay rent to a landlord who owns the land and the buildings that are on that land, and we pay them in order to live because there are very few places where you can go and just set up shop. There are almost none, in fact, because you can't just build a house on, here in Canada, crown land. You can't just go build a house on government land, and you can't go build a house on somebody else's land. So when you are born into this system of capitalism, Well, you have to pay somebody rent or you go fuck yourself, essentially. What this means is that eventually, through the accumulation of things like rent and the appropriation of the excess value of somebody's labor, in order to afford the rent, you have to have money. And in order to get money under capitalism, if you don't own land and capital, you have to sell your labor to a capitalist to survive. If you work at a fast food restaurant, if you work at a store, if you work anywhere where you have a boss who's paying you, or you work at a company, you are selling your labor to survive. You are in the working class, and the thing that you have of value that you can sell in this society where everything is for sale and commodified is your own body, your labor. I can work, I can do things, and then somebody who owns some land can give me some money in order to go live, and I'm selling my labor. So that's sort of the fundamental of capitalism, is that some people have to sell their labor to survive, and other people own land and the means of production, and they use that to pay laborers. But the thing is that they don't pay laborers 100% of the value of what they make, right? The classic example is working at a factory. Say you're a laborer, you're working at a factory, you produce $100 worth of goods in an hour, but you're only paid $20 an hour for your work. That means that the capitalist who owns the factory pockets $80 of that money and does whatever they want with it. Now, they could use that money to give some Christmas bonuses. They could use that money to open up some more factories. They could donate the money to a local orphanage, but they don't have to do anything with it. They can just sit on it. They can go buy a yacht to put on their yacht. They can go buy more land that's for sale and build more factories in order to pocket more of the money.
Capitalism is unstable, capitalism is unequal, and capitalism is fundamentally undemocratic.
It's not a democratic system because you, as a worker, you don't get a say in what is happening with the value of the things that you produce with your labor. You just get paid a little portion of it, and then the capitalist gets to do whatever they think is best with it. Maybe buying a bunch of ketamine and creating a racist AI bot. In capitalist societies, you don't have a right to housing. You don't have a right to food. You don't have a right to clean water. You only have a right to sell your labor in order to have access to these things. If you can't afford those things because either you can't sell your labor very easily because you're disabled, or because you have trauma and mental health issues, or because you broke your leg and you don't have any social supports, it's go fuck yourself time, because that's just it. And now you're homeless because you can't afford to pay rent. And you don't even have a right to live on the street. Really, you're going to be constantly harassed and kicked out, but there's nowhere else for you to go because housing is not a human right in capitalist societies, because, well, if it was, it would throw a real wrench in the ability of capitalists to exploit workers for their labor, because it's the threat of homelessness that keeps people selling their labor even in situations where they don't really love what their labor is doing, such as working at a prison, or being part of the military, or building a data center on top of a sacred site that holds clean water that is now going to be used for a cooling center so people can create Shrek with 3 titties, or ask ChatGPT to validate their delusional belief that everybody is out to get them. The system of capitalism incentivizes hierarchy and competition. And the propaganda that we're given within capitalist societies tells us that competition is good, it breeds innovation, but actually what it does is pit us against each other in a desperate bid for survival, which really goes against human instinct. I'm an anthropologist. I have 3 anthropology degrees, including a PhD and a master's and an undergraduate degree. And let me tell you, just in short form, human nature is to work collectively and cooperatively. We are a social species. Not all species of primate are social species. Some are more solo, some live in big groups. We are a species of primate that lives in big groups, and we depend on each other to survive. We can't do everything for ourselves, and we evolved to actually be quite different personality-wise and skills-wise from one another, because we need everybody within a community and all their different skills and strengths in order to collectively survive. We need some people to not have children because children are incredibly costly to raise in the species of Homo sapiens. So we need grandmothers and grandparents and aunties and uncles and people who are not attracted to the opposite sex, and they're not therefore not going to have kids, to help out collectively so that the people who do have kids don't have the whole burden on them and have the whole community helping out so that we survive and thrive and raise our children, and then the children take care of the elders, including all of the people who didn't themselves have kids, and everyone survives. Under the system of capitalism, it's just nuclear families, and if you better have kids or you have no one to take care of you when you're older because the state is going to barely support you, and therefore it coerces people into having children, which benefits the capitalists because you're reproducing the laborers that they want, and it punishes anybody who goes outside of that nuclear family gender norm because they want more laborers, they want you to fit into this very narrow box in the system, and so it punishes people who are queer or trans or just don't want to have kids through social punishments, and that's a whole other topic. Within the system of capitalism, you also have to have in-groups and out-groups because dehumanization is a key essential part of how the system functions. Because the system is inherently exploitative, as in some people have to sell their labor and some people own everything, to justify this situation, which is pretty obviously unfair, capitalism as a system has created these justifications that involve dehumanizing certain people within the population so that exploiting them for their labor just makes sense and is fine because they're barely people anyway. We see this in the form of anti-blackness and racism that arose at the same time as colonization and capitalism were really taking hold as a way to dehumanize Africans in order to justify their enslavement in the service of capital. We see this all the time, and it's a malleable thing where there's always different outgroups that can be created that can serve two purposes. One, they're dehumanized enough that the fact that they are exploited and policed and taken advantage of is justifiable because they're just like that, and so then you have the prison industrial complex. As well as, I might add, just men in general. Men and women are dehumanized in different ways for this. Men are dehumanized so that they can be good little workers, and women are dehumanized so that they can be subservient and just be procreators in order to create more labor. And then we help the system by doing it to each other, which is, I've talked about that in my other work too. But the other super duper fun reason that groups of people are dehumanized within capitalism is that capitalism always collapses under its own contradictions. It is not sustainable. It is heavily exploitative. It destroys the environment. It makes people miserable. So when people are starting to develop these very justified angers about their living conditions, they are disconnected from nature, which as animals, when we are disconnected from nature, we are as miserable as animals in a lab or a zoo are. That's just us collectively in society being disconnected from nature. We are unhappy and we're competing with each other and we're arguing with each other and we're dehumanizing each other, and it feels bad. And we're also getting poorer and the rich are getting richer, and this happens everywhere as long as capitalism functions because more and more people in the system are exploited and fewer people have access to the resources. Capitalism starts to collapse under its own contradictions, and therefore capital needs scapegoats. And so that's the other reason that certain groups of people, especially globally speaking, Black people. Anti-Blackness globally is a particularly pervasive conception that has created this permanent underclass of people, but many different groups of people can be used as scapegoats for the problems of capitalism. And we're seeing that happen today with the rise of fascism in the US, where people can't afford to feed their families, there's addiction and poverty and violence and frustration. People are just generally unhappy. They can't pay their medical bills. There's shootings. America's a dangerous, unhappy place to live. And so capitalists don't want to change that because this system is making them money, which they think makes them happy. It doesn't. Capitalists are really deeply miserable and unhappy people. But they don't want to change it because they don't know anything else. They're short-sighted and they're miserable and they're addicted to money and power. So what do? They funnel the justified rage of the working class against each other. So it's not the fault of the capitalists who are making all of our lives miserable through this system. It's the fault of immigrants taking your jobs. It's the fault of trans people for existing. It's the fault of Jews for controlling everything. None of these things are true, but there are ways that capitalists very conveniently and honestly pretty smartly scapegoat all of the problems that exist under capitalism towards these groups of people, which not only takes the pressure off of them, but it causes us in the working class to fight one another and blame one another.
Guys, you are not under the thumb of a Jewish feminist plot to turn you into girly soy boy cucks. Cultural Marxism did not turn you into placid IKEA consumers. Capitalism did.
This is a really expensive project that capitalists have to participate in. Like, it costs them a lot of money. I mean, it also makes them money at the same time, but the propaganda machine that convinces the working class to hate one another is very, very strong. And it has to be, because it goes against our human nature to be drawn to one another, to help one another. It's billions of dollars poured into these various propaganda outlets, your right-wing news outlets, your Fox News, purchasing and manipulating social media companies and algorithms in order to push things like PragerU and bullshit like that, alt-right pipelines to tell workers that it's other workers that are the problem. This whole thing costs them a ton of money, but they have to do it because otherwise we might band together and be like, it's actually the system that is the issue. And who are the people holding the levers of power within the system? Well, it's certainly not trans people. It's the billionaires and the sub-billionaires, the 999 millions that are just waiting to go to the top. It's also important, and if I can leave you with this to not make this video too long, we need to remember that at no point in this system is it really the fault of any one individual within the system. We can talk about blame and fault all day long, but it kind of misses the mark, because if we decide that it's actually the fault of billionaires specifically, well, A, that lets off the hook everybody else who's not technically a billionaire, but who is involved in reproducing and maintaining this system. But also, if we got rid of every billionaire that existed today, the people just below them would rise up to the top again, because the system itself is the problem. Every individual within this system thinks that they're doing the right thing, thinks that they're doing the best that they can, and many of the people who are doing the very, very wrong thing, they truly believe that this is just the way the world works and the only way it can work, because they have believed the propaganda that's been in place for centuries, and they're just doing their thing, and they're doing what makes logical sense to them within this system. But it's the system itself, it's almost its own organism that needs to be changed. In a video that I'll make soon, I'll talk more about the specifics of what we can actually do. I do talk about that in my work all the time, so I won't get into it too much here, but union organizing is a really big one in order to fight back against this system, is building collective labor power. So join a union, or if you're in a union, try to improve your union and make it more democratic. There's all sorts of other things that you can do, but that's the most effective one at this moment. The reason unions are so effective is because the only language that those in power speak is power, and the only way that we can do things collectively is by having that collective power. So you as one worker not showing up to work in protest, well, you're just gonna get fired. But if none of the workers show up to protest, well, then the capitalist who owns the operation freaks out because the money stops coming in, because the laborers actually hold all of the power in a capitalist system, because they are the ones who do the stuff. Like, companies cannot function without the people who are actually doing the labor, which are the people at the bottom of the system. But we're too busy fighting each other to realize that we're the ones that have the power if we could just work together. If you unionize, then you can strike when you have a problem with the way that the company is run. If you want more money, or if you want the company to stop polluting, or if you want more democracy in the workplace, all of these things can only be achieved through collective action, which means collective worker power, which means unionizing. Learning about the system is the best way to start, and you're already doing it. You're watching this video. I'm so excited for you. You made it this far into the video. Incredible. You're on your way. We're gonna do this together. The more that you learn about the system, the better you understand it, and then you know how to fight back against it and to work with others. And you also start to recognize what are the steps that are within your control, because it's easy to be despairing about the state of the world, but there are some things that are within your locus of control. A lot of them you're not going to really like, but they're going to be really good for you in the long run, such as healing your internal trauma, your childhood trauma, your generational trauma, in order to have better emotional regulation and communication skills so that you can talk to other workers about these issues and organize better. And this is coming from my expertise as a longtime activist and organizer, and also as an anthropologist with a PhD who literally studied the topic of activism and organizing for my PhD, and saw so many organizations and people who are trying to do really good work run into walls because of their inability to breathe, regulate, connect, commit, and other forms of movement building and connection work that are really essential, because this work is really hard, because we are all very on edge and we're all very traumatized and scared, and that causes us to be really tense and angry at each other and be really reactive. And the only way for us to actually connect and grow this movement are to start to tend to our wounds, inner and collective, so that we can actually start to work together on this stuff. And it is hard work, but it is really rewarding. There is a box inside of you that contains a lot of pain, and I don't know where you personally are in your journey towards unpacking that box and looking at the stuff and figuring out how to truly deeply love yourself and forgive yourself and love others and forgive others. But wherever you are in that journey, as long as it is a journey that you are on, it's going to be good for your ability to not only heal and thrive and actually live a good, happy life, but to connect with other people and work with other people in order to become a part of the collective solution to the problem of capitalism. If, as part of your healing journey, you're interested in the use of plant medicines and psychedelics, but you're not totally sure how to go about it, I do offer psychedelic journey curation services, and this is actually like part of my activism and organizing. My justice work is helping people to develop a relationship to plant medicines in a decolonial way so that you can have inner healing and be able to connect better with yourself and others. And I do that work to support this work that I do, my organizing, my education work. So check out the link in the description if you are interested in a psychedelic journey curation / consultation. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, just let me know. I'm happy to make more videos on any topics that people are interested in and feel that maybe I haven't covered yet, but there's a lot more in the pipeline, the decolonial pipeline that we're trying to build on top of the alt-right one. Thank you so much to my patrons. You're the best. You're absolutely the light of my life, the apples of my eye, you know, after like my kids and stuff. You guys are second, right after the human children that I birthed. You guys, right below my love for my actual human children, is my love for you, my comrades. If you also want my undying love and support, but you're not a patron yet, go join my Patreon, become a supporter, get access to a bunch of other videos and writing. My spiciest writing goes on Patreon, so be prepared for that. And you can also get access to my full PhD dissertation, which is available to my patrons as well. Like this video right now and subscribe to my channel, or I'll make you walk the plank. There is no way to make this pirate shit cool. Oh no, I can't do a real pirate, so I'm gonna do this version of a pirate. I'll make you walk the plank and gut you like a fish unless you like this video and subscribe to my channel. I don't know, maybe capitalism isn't that bad. Maybe it's fine to have like no clean water left because we've got like squishmallows and whatever the fuck. Harry Potter Lego. Like, sure, it's made us all really lonely, but at least we have individually packaged meals that we can eat while alone. That's convenient or whatever. Where's the garbage going from that? I don't know, somewhere. Maybe the Philippines. I heard we ship it overseas. Out of sight, out of mind, not my problem. That's definitely not gonna come back to bite us all in the ass. The big pile of trash floating in the ocean? Yeah, that's probably fine. What's the alternative? Living in a society where people actually care about each other and the environment? Unrealistic, am I right? Arr.